Hello and welcome to my second post of my fiction. Whenever I read fiction, I'm going to wear this silly mask because it makes me feel more comfortable. This one is called Rococo McMansion. A woman leaves science and rationality behind for a man whose fractured soul reminds her of her disastrous mother. Part 1, Chapter 1. My sisters and I were mostly out of the house before our mom started her nudist phase and began inviting groups of Harley-riding bikers over to pool parties at her rococo McMansion. But her road to ruin had started years earlier, when I was just 16. When I was 16, I was a happy little cheerleader, effortlessly stick-thin in a time when a waifish figure was all the rage. I had good test scores, and I had the boyfriend that all of the girls wanted. I understood all of this. I did not understand my mother. I only realized that my mother was crazy when she ended up on the front page of the city paper for getting caught having sex with a prominent politician in a public park. I remember her running up to her room and slamming the door when she heard my father's car pull into the garage. He bellowed out her name over and over as he stomped up the stairs and banged on the door to her bedroom. "Let me in! I'll knock this door down!" he roared like the big bad wolf. "It's not true! It's all a lie!" she shrieked from behind the door. He banged on the door again. "Open the door!" he boomed. I'd had him yell at me once when I'd said something disrespectful, and it was not something I was eager to repeat. After a red-faced gorilla blares rage in your face, something inside you freezes and makes you harder, yet more fragile. "No, I'm not opening this door, not until you calm down, please," she said. When she said the last word, she had softened her voice, making herself sound small and desperate. The rest of us listened from across the house, in a room with lavender castles decorating the walls, waiting with bated breath until they stopped screaming at one another. Not long after this, all of our childhood pets began to die of neglect. First, it was the goldfish in the little fountain next to the swimming pool. My dad had been the one who fed them and cleaned the water. Then it was Bonthrop the dog, left outside with no water on one of the hottest days of the year. Ants crawled around his glassy eyes as tears filled mine. After that it was my parrot, Shell, short for Shelmerdine. She had been making too much noise while I was out of town, so she had been moved to the basement, where she was out of sight, out of mind. "I'm a good bird," she said weakly, over and over again in her comical parrot voice. My younger sister was traumatized by guilt because she hadn't saved little Shell. She still hears her cries sometimes. The only pet that survived all of this was the cat, Marmaduke. I remember holding Marmaduke and feeling upset when I had to commandeer the phone from my lovesick and jilted mom after she had drunk dialed the father of one of my school friends. "Sorry about that," I said into the receiver. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled at my mother, as Marmaduke leapt from my arms and scampered down the hallway. My mother's newly divorced new best friend shook her head at me and said, "She's just blowing off steam." That night, my mom came into my bedroom, wailing that she wanted to die. I hated seeing her red, puffy face and her long, white, matronly nightgown, surrounded by the smell of red wine and sorrow. I was there for her because she was my mom. She had always told me who I was and who I needed to be. I held her while she sobbed. Up until that point, it had always been me sobbing to her, trying to gain her forgiveness for some mistake that I had made. When I finally disconnected from her to preserve my sanity, I felt empty. Chapter 2. Years later, I chose a husband who reminded me of my father, a cold, distant workhorse. My husband reflected my emptiness right back at me and filled my life with work. He only loved what I could do for him, which is often the same thing as love. It is just a bit less holistic and more specific than what most people think of when they think of love. We lived from the joyful feeling of comfort and warmth that came from raising children. But as they grew up, the drive to play with fire hit me as hard as it had hit my mother, and I became vulnerable to an attraction to a certain type of man who was the opposite of my husband in every way. I found a man who reminded me of my estranged mother, a woman who swung from chandeliers, threw drinks in men's faces, and danced on tables. In the sunshine of her love, I had grown up believing all of her lies. After seeing her broken and bitter, my heart was empty, vacant. I wanted him to fill it. I wanted his lies. While fastidiously staking out and defending my scientific career over the course of decades, I'd kept myself cool and calm. But a heat wave rose when I saw him and remembered that there was another world outside of my physics fortress. Like a little duckling which peeks its head out of its shell and imprints on the first thing it sees, I instinctively wanted to claim him as my own, follow him, and study his every move. What sort of disaster makes a woman think like that? Was it all my mother's fault? Was I going to make the same mistakes she made? I wanted to write to him, but I knew what would happen if I did. Dear John, we don't know each other, but I'm in love with you. To be more precise, I'm in love with an idea of you. I could care less what your occupation is, or where you live, or any of those things that tend to matter. I'm in love with the idea that I could find someone that makes me feel like a version of me that existed long ago. I have a perhaps naive sense that most people don't understand or care to understand much of what I say, and based on astoundingly limited information, I've decided that you would understand, that is. With love, me. What sort of reply would a man send to a woman who has clearly lost her mind? Dear you, this is very sweet, and I'm very flattered, but this just isn't how life works. Best, J. I would write back. Dear John, how are you so sure? Me. He would write back. Dear you, I just know, J. I'd write back. Dear John, how? Me. I would get no reply. I didn't give up on my dream of him. I listened to love songs on repeat and became determined to haunt him like a ghost in an imaginary realm, whispering hints of spring flowers and cool summer mornings into the air around him. A ghost loses much of its power to frighten after it jumps out and says boo. So by writing to him, I would be playing my cards badly. I should sneak up on him more slowly. I wanted him to feel the hairs stand up on the back of his neck when I got close to him. I wanted him to be afraid of what I could do to him. My kisses had always been effective in the past, so Why should they fail me now? Love is terror, and this was madness. I was a mad woman on a strange mission that made no logical sense. Up until this point in my life, I had been guided by logic and science. I had become unmoored. But before I could work on this insane project, I needed to feed lunch to my 3 teenage children and make sure that my husband had enough t-shirts and underwear for his trip to Japan. On my way to the laundry room, I noticed that my mother had sent a birthday card to my youngest child. I hadn't spoken with my mother in years. I'll stop there. To read the rest of this story and others, check out my collection of novelettes. It's called Disentanglement. I am fascinated with women who completely screw up their lives. I have not done so myself so far, but I can see what drives that sort of self-destruction. Instead of doing this myself, I write about it. Thank you for watching, and please tune in for my next video.